Hello ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video. We're back here on Marvel Spider-Man 2. So I wanted to take a moment to talk about the ending of Marvel Spider-Man 2 and just try to predict exactly where the story could go in the upcoming installment. So if you played the game, you will know that at the end of the story, Peter did his utmost to save Harry from the symbiote while simultaneously trying to get rid of it with the hopes that he could save him and the rest of the city as a whole. And as a result, Peter was able to get rid of the symbiote, but at the same time, it resulted in Harry having a very slim chance of being able to come back to life once more. And it wasn't until Norman Osborn he ended up showing up to the Emily May Foundation and was aware of all of the carnage that occurred between Peter, Miles, and Venom, and he noticed that his son was in a very vegetative state to the point where he had to get tended to the hospital. And when he noticed who was responsible for all of the mayhem, well, let's just say he was none too pleased. I'll show you guys some footage so you know what I'm talking about.
Harry.
Pulse is weak. We gotta move.
What have you done? What have you done to him?
I'm sorry.
I'm coming with you, wait.
There are traces of brain activity, but his chances of coming back are very slim.
Just keep him alive.
Why?
Basically, Norman Osborn is under the impression that because of the Spider-Men, Harry is currently in a vegetative state to where his chances of coming back are very slim. And boy, the events that proceeded after that started to get very exciting.
What do you want?
The Spider-Men. You know who they are, don't you?
Why?
They ruined my son.
Good. We all have to experience loss. Even you, Norman.
What are you writing?
The final chapter.
Norman Osborn attempted to reconcile with one of his former colleagues in an attempt to go after the Spider-Man to get revenge on what they have done to both of them respectively. Now I'm sure everybody wants to know, where does the story go in Marvel Spider-Man 3 now that we have that ending? This is my prediction. We obviously know that Miles is going to be the main Spider-Man going forward, since Peter is most likely going to be taking a break from fulfilling his duties of being a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. At some point in the story, Miles ends up discovering that not only is Norman plotting to take over the city as the Green Goblin, but also Otto Octavius ended up escaping from prison due to the help of Norman as well. Miles has never taken on a villain that is as smart as Otto Octavius is, so I'm going to assume that Miles, at some point in the story, he's going to go to Peter to try to get advice on how to deal with somebody like Octavius. Especially when Peter ends up finding out that Norman Osborn played a role in letting Otto get out of prison sooner to try to join forces together to make a plot to go after the Spider-Men. Norman Osborn makes an arrangement with the officers at the raft to allow Otto Octavius to be bailed sooner than what his original sentence was. They come to an arrangement where they decide to figure out a way to try to go after the Spider-Men for what they both did to them in their respective right. Now I do want to make a mention, as I forgot to do so in the recording of the video, but you also got to keep in mind, Norman Osborn is a very selfish individual who does not care about anybody else besides himself and the people who are in his social circle, especially those who are in his family too. It wouldn't surprise me that in the process of Norman and Otto plotting how to go after the Spider-Men, Norman, deep down inside himself, he thinks to himself exactly how he plans to leave Otto hung and dry, especially when his only purpose in bringing Otto out of prison is to take the knowledge that Octavius garnered from the events of Marvel Spider-Man and use that for his own personal gain to enact his revenge on the Spider-Men for what he presumes they did to Harry Osborn. Norman Osborn, he gets a hold of the G Serum and uses it to transform into the Green Goblin. Otto Octavius, he goes back to his original lab to try to restructure the arms that he used to be able to become the villain that he became in Marvel Spider-Man. In the process of all of these events happening, Peter, he ends up getting the urge to try to come back as Spider-Man, so that way he can ensure that Miles knows what he's doing when taking on these inevitable threats. But at the same time, Miles still keeps insisting to Peter that he should take a break from being Spider-Man and just focus on being Peter Parker. Along the way, Miles ends up getting a new ally in Cindy Moon, the daughter of the man Albert Moon who Rio Morales is seeing. Cindy, she then ends up evolving into being Silk, that being a female version of Spider-Man, and ends up becoming Miles' ally in trying to combat Norman and Otto. However, the power and magnitude of both Norman and Otto becomes too much for Miles and Cindy to end up combating, so as a result, Peter ends up having no choice but to don the tights and return as Spider-Man. And then in the process of the Spider Heroes colliding with Norman and Otto, Peter tries his utmost to try to get through to Norman and tell him, look, I'm not responsible for what happened to your son. Yeah, he may not have survived the attack, but at the same time, he did his utmost to save him, so it's not really his fault. As if anything, Norman is responsible for bringing the symbiote into the city and having Harry use it to cure his treatment. So if anything, Norman is the one who was responsible for how Harry became in the first place. Peter could try to use that to get through to Norman to get him to realize, like, look, this is your mess. You are responsible for what happened to your son in the first place. Taking your anger out on somebody like me isn't going to give you the fulfillment that you think it's going to give you. And then in the process of Peter trying to get through to Norman, Otto ends up becoming baffled by what he is seeing, and then as a result, he shows his true colors and then decides to stab Norman in the back. The reason why I say that in particular is because he still has some level of vindication toward Norman for not getting the revenge that he believes he deserves, while simultaneously having to deal with being put into the raft thanks to Spider-Man. And just like what Norman did to Otto back in the day, Otto decides to return the favor by stabbing Norman in the back by using whatever he plotted against him for his own personal gain. And as a result of turning over a new leaf, Norman decides to surrender and let the Spider-Men handle Otto Octavius, who then ends up becoming the supposed final villain in the game. And then once Peter, Miles, and Cindy end up putting a stop to Otto Octavius's antics, Peter then decides to reveal himself to Norman that, look, I'm Spider-Man. Understand that what I did is not my fault. I wanted to save your son. I wanted to save Harry, but unfortunately I had a choice to make, and that choice was to either save one person and sacrifice the humanity of the entire city of New York, or save the entire population of New York, even if it meant losing a best friend that I loved so dearly. either be selfless or selfish. And Spider-Man, this version in particular, has never been selfish before. Norman then comes around and then he eventually apologizes to Peter and Miles for the carnage that he ended up committing around the city. Or Norman, in the process of him realizing the error of his ways, to which he ends up surrendering to the Spider-Men, Otto Octavius, he decides to come in and have Norman meet his demise by killing him entirely. Because if you think about it, back in Marvel Spider-Man, Otto wasn't able to get the revenge that he had been desiring for the longest time against Osborn. Especially if you look at the ending to Marvel Spider-Man 2, Otto definitely had some level of vindication for the vitriol that he had to sustain from Osborn back in the day. So it wouldn't surprise me if Otto decided to do that as well by having Norman meet his demise entirely instead of sparing his life and just stabbing him in the back instead. Once Norman has already turned a new leaf, he then realizes that what he did caused a whole lot of damage to New York, and as a result, he decided to step down as the mayor of the city. However, in terms of Otto having Norman meet his demise, it wouldn't surprise me if we end up seeing some sort of event take place where Otto does something to where he ends up meeting his demise at his own hand. But that's pretty much my whole 2 cents on what I think the story of Marvel Spider-Man 3 will be.
Oh, you're not so scary, are you?
It's at this location, by the way. But yeah, I just wanted to give my 2 cents on what I think the story of Marvel Spider-Man 3 will play out. I know I didn't go into specifics as to how Miles has developed as a character, but also how Peter has developed as a character, and a few other things too. I just wanted to go off of the basis of how Norman and Otto will play a role in the story leading into Marvel Spider-Man 3. Now, I highly doubt that the events that I have stated as to how the story is going to go in Marvel Spider-Man 3 will play out the way that I described it. I highly doubt that's going to be the case. I have no problem with being proved wrong. I just think it's really interesting that Insomniac are potentially playing into the reconciliation of both Norman Osborn and Otto Octavius, so what they might end up doing and how those characters end up being presented in Spider-Man 3, especially since both of those characters in the story, like, they have a history with one another, and Otto still has a level of vindication toward Norman for what happened back in the day. So the fact that Norman is deciding to give Otto a chance at potentially coming together and plotting something to try to take down the Spider-Man for what they both did to them in their respective right. Honestly, the sky's the limit on where Insomniac decides to take the story into the next installment, but regardless, I will be there. But I want to know from you guys, how do you think the story of Marvel Spider-Man 3 is going to play out after seeing how Spider-Man 2 ended? But also, how crucial of a role do you think Peter Parker and Cindy Moon are going to play in the upcoming story now that Miles Morales is the main Spider-Man going forward? Let me know in the comments down below. I want to know what you guys have to say. But anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, you're more than welcome to drop a like on it, and if you enjoy this type of content, you are more than welcome to hit that subscribe button and that bell notification so you can be notified of when my newest video has gone live. But until then, thank you all so much for watching. It's been your boy Discreet, and I'll catch you in the next video.